Threat hunting often sounds like something only elite teams do on giant walls of screens. But in reality, it can be a calm, structured way to look for trouble before it explodes into a crisis. Instead of waiting for alerts to light up your dashboard, you deliberately go hunting for signs of bad activity that your tools have not yet called out. This insight is part of the Tuesday Insights feature from Bare Metal Cyber Magazine, and it is aimed at helping you see threat hunting as a practical habit, not a source of panic. Threat hunting is a human practice, not a product you can buy. It sits alongside monitoring, detection engineering, and incident response as a way to ask, what might we be missing, given how attackers really behave? A hunter starts with a focused question, uses the data and tools already in place, and works through that question in a structured way. It lives naturally in or near your security operations work, even if your SOC is just a couple of people doing security part-time. And it is most powerful when it becomes a discipline rather than a one-off exercise. A useful way to think about threat hunting is that it turns nervous hunches into testable hypotheses. Instead of, I am worried someone might be abusing old remote access, you say, if an attacker used legacy RDP into our environment, what traces would I expect to see? That hypothesis gives you direction. It also separates threat hunting from things it can look like on the surface. It is not incident response, because you are not yet sure anything is wrong. And it is not penetration testing, because you are working from the inside out rather than simulating an external attacker. A simple threat hunt usually begins with a single scenario that matters to your organization. You might care about impossible travel logins, unusual use of privileged accounts, or persistence via scheduled tasks. You choose one, write it down as a clear statement, and then map that scenario to specific data sources, identity provider sign-in logs, endpoint telemetry, Windows event logs, or VPN records. You decide what time window you can realistically cover and what filters will strip away obvious noise before you start. Once you know what you are looking for and where, you translate the idea into queries or views in the tools you already use. That might be a SIM search for admin logins from new IP addresses, or an endpoint query for new scheduled tasks created after midnight. When the results come back, the human work starts. You skim past entries that match well-understood patterns and pause on anything that does not fit the way your environment normally behaves. From there, you pivot deeper on the oddities. If a login looks strange, you look up the user, the device, recent changes, and open tickets that might explain it. If a host is running unfamiliar software, you trace when it first appeared and who deployed it. At the end of the time you set aside for the hunt, you write down what you asked, what you looked at, and what you concluded. If something looks truly suspicious, you hand it off into your normal incident process. If not, you still capture ideas for new alerts or logging improvements. Threat hunting depends on a few quiet prerequisites that are easy to overlook. You need at least basic logging for the systems you care about, and you need some sense of what normal looks like for user logins, admin activity, and key applications. You also need time that is actually protected, so hunts are not constantly interrupted by other tasks. Just as important is culture. Leaders and peers must understand that we did not find anything critical, but we improved our baselines is a valid and valuable outcome. When threat hunting connects to problems you already worry about, it becomes much easier to justify and sustain. Privileged access is a natural place to start because compromised admin accounts can do so much damage. You might hunt for local admin logins from unexpected workstations or for domain admin activity happening at odd hours. Another approachable pattern is to hunt around high-risk remote access like RDP or VPN, especially when it comes from geographies that do not match your workforce or business footprint. Small teams can find quick wins by focusing on a single, well-logged system and a modest time window. One week, you might look at identity provider logs only, scanning for sign-ins that bypass multi-factor or come from brand new devices. Another week, you might focus on endpoint telemetry, searching for suspicious command line activity, such as unusual PowerShell usage or binaries running from temporary folders. These hunts are not about advanced analytics. They are about asking good questions and seeing how your environment actually behaves. Over time, you can build more strategic hunts that span multiple data sources and tell a bigger story. A recurring lateral movement hunt, for example, might combine authentication logs, endpoint data, and some network visibility to show how service accounts move through the environment. Industry-specific hunts can focus on critical business systems, unusual queries against finance databases, strange access to patient records, or unexpected activity in industrial control networks. Each of these hunts can be written up as a simple template so they can be repeated and refined. External events are another useful trigger for threat hunting. When a new vulnerability, ransomware campaign, or high-profile breach hits the news, leadership will often ask whether you might be exposed. A targeted hunt can look for vulnerable versions, known indicators of compromise, or suspicious use of a protocol tied to the campaign. Instead of answering, "We are not sure," you can say, "We looked for these specific patterns in these systems over this time window, and here is what we found." That makes the situation more concrete for everyone involved. When threat hunting is done with intention, the benefits are tangible. You can catch weak signals earlier, like a subtle pattern of credential misuse or an odd remote connection that has not yet triggered an alert. Analysts develop a much clearer sense of normal behavior, so future investigations feel less like guesswork and more like pattern recognition. This familiarity reduces stress when a real incident does occur because the ground is not entirely unknown. Each well-run hunt also tends to leave behind something reusable. Maybe you turn a one-time query into a standing alert rule, or you build a dashboard that shows risky logins at a glance. Perhaps you discover that certain logs are not being collected at all and work with system owners to fix that gap. Over time, hunts feed better detections, and improved detections suggest new hunt ideas. That feedback loop quietly strengthens your whole detection program. There are trade-offs, and it helps to be honest about them. Threat hunting consumes focused time that could otherwise go to closing tickets or handling day-to-day tasks, so you need support from management to protect that time. It also demands a mix of skills: basic understanding of attacker techniques, familiarity with your tools, and knowledge of how your own organization operates. Threat hunting cannot make up for missing logs, a broken incident response workflow, or a completely unknown asset landscape. Threat hunting also has limits in what it can catch. Some attacks are extremely fast, automated, or subtle, and they may not leave the kind of traces a human can realistically spot in logs. Others might exploit blind spots you simply cannot see yet. Treating threat hunting as an accelerator for a solid foundation rather than a replacement for good architecture, patching, and access control keeps expectations grounded and avoids disappointment. You can tell when threat hunting is breaking down by how it feels to the people doing it. If a hunt means scrolling through random logs until someone gets tired, there is no structure. If hunts are constantly started and abandoned with no notes, no detections, and no follow-up, the practice is not adding real value. Over time, people will quietly avoid the work because it never seems to change anything in the environment. Shallow adoption often shows up as sporadic, hero-driven hunts that happen only when a major breach hits the headlines or an executive is nervous. There may be no schedule, no simple templates, and no connection back to actual business risks. Analysts might chase whatever new feature shows up in a tool, rather than focusing on how real attackers would target your environment. When that pattern sets in, threat hunting starts to look like a side project instead of a core part of staying ahead. Healthy threat hunting leaves a trail you can see. Hunts are planned with clear questions, time-boxed, and documented in a place where others can read and reuse them. A meaningful portion of hunts result in concrete changes, such as new or improved alert rules, better logging on key systems, small access adjustments, or tweaked runbooks. Leaders can point to simple measures like how many hunts were run,
how many produced follow-up actions, and how quickly those actions were closed.
Another positive sign is collaboration. Good hunts pull in identity administrators, network engineers, system owners, or application teams to help explain what is normal and what is not. That back and forth increases trust and often exposes process gaps or assumptions that nobody had written down. Over time, the cycle of hypothesis, investigation, and action becomes part of how the organization thinks about security, rather than something reserved for special occasions.
At its heart, threat hunting is about turning vague worries into structured investigations that either find real issues or increase confidence that your defenses are working. It sits beside monitoring and incident response as a way to explore gray areas where tools are quiet or unsure, especially around attacker movement and misuse of legitimate access. If you treat it as a calm, repeatable practice instead of a frantic scramble, you can start small, learn a lot about your own environment, and steadily build a hunting habit that makes surprise incidents less likely and less severe.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.